Okay, I'm calling this meeting to order, and it is 6:34. Well, we have a number of things on our agenda this evening, including the Forest Committee is going to be here at some point. Welcome to all of you who are here. Would you like to tell us why, or introduce yourselves, or?
Sure. So I'm Ruby McAdoo, and this group over here just came from a PTO meeting across the hall, and I am one of the leadership people on the PTO, and we're here primarily because we want to engage around merger questions, and we appreciate that you reached out to get parent involvement.
Great, we're glad you're here. If you ever have a specific thing you want to put on the agenda, just send me an email and I'll make sure you're actually on the agenda. So it might be something we have to vote on, and then we can't do that unless we warn it.
Yep.
So, anytime. Okay, well, I guess we can move on to the clerk's report from here. Oh, I'm sorry, hi. You don't have to talk.
I would rather not. I'm just here to observe.
Well,
Thank you.
I move that we approve the minutes of March 20th and March 28th, 2019 meeting.
Do I have a second? Sorry. Anything anybody needs to change or wants to add? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And none opposed, so there you go, we're all done. Has anyone received any communications that they'd like to share with the rest of us? No, okay, cool. And we've already recognized our visitors here. And let's see, we should ratify the warrants if Tim would like to, or someone would like to read them out. I think they're sitting in front of you, Sergio.
It's like, okay. I move that we approve the warrants, PTSD warrants. There are two here. First in the amount of $93,276.27, and the second in the amount of $62,184.57.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. And none opposed, so we're good with that. Administrative reports?
Sure, yeah.
So, last Friday, we spent time as a leadership team, WSESU, with all the principals and program directors, working with first responders on school safety, doing different scenarios, working in small groups and large groups. Outlying town principals had one group, in-town principals and high school U6 had one group. We've been pretty diligent about making sure that every few months we're doing something around school safety, and always looking at trying to make sure that we're all hazards ready. So we hate to think about the worst case scenario, and we prepare a lot for worst case scenarios, but we also need to think it's June, and there are kids out here on the playground, and all of a sudden there's a big weather situation, and what happens, and are we putting kids on buses at 3 o'clock when there's supposed to be a huge thunderstorm coming through, that type of thing. So we've been doing that. In the afternoon, we spent time working with Heather Lynn from our attorney, one of our attorneys, making sure we're all up to date on harassment, hazing, and bullying, and the regulations and law around that statute. And the last thing, and I probably said this before, and I'm going to say it again, on May 24th at SIT, there's an equity summit. Board members are invited. It's being sponsored by the Vermont Principals Association. They've had one in the north, I assume Burlington, one in the middle of the state, and this is the one in the southern part of the state.
Can you say the date again?
Yep, May 24.
24?
Mm-hmm. And the objective is to really have students from regional schools school leaders, community members, really looking at what's happening in schools and how are we ensuring that we are offering equitable educational opportunities for all our students. And hearing a student perspective, and I think that's a really important thing. As adults working in schools, we need to hear what it is that students are feeling about their educational experience. So May 24th, when we finally get the sign up, I'll send it to all the board members and you can register. It'll probably be a first come, first served registration. That's it for me. Thank you.
And her?
Yeah, sure. I've got a bunch of stuff. I'll try to be quick. Most of it's calendar related. Tomorrow's the middle school science fair for grades 6, 7, and 8. That'll be in the gym from 1 to 2:30, and it's open to the public. I encourage everybody to come and take a look at some of the things that the kids have been working on. Week after next, on Thursday, is School Safety Day. That's happening. That's an annual event as well. Arlene, the school nurse, has put that together for us again. We'll have Putney Fire Department will be here. We'll have the smoke trailer, which we didn't have last year, which is kind of nice and it's actually fun for the kids. But more importantly, it's an incredibly useful safety education tool. We'll have rescue, we'll have CPR for the older kids, for the middle school kids, a bunch of stuff is happening. Ongoing stuff includes Girls on the Run, which has been running for several weeks now, is very well attended. Josh Fields has started a running group that runs a couple of days a week. That's also well attended. He's got anywhere between 12 and 15 kids each time they do that. We'll get mountain biking going once we get back from break, likely take a week off to organize, make sure everything's dry enough for that before we go out on the trails. So stay tuned for that. We've got a field day coming up on the 5th of June. It'll be a school-wide field day. It'll be a lot of fun. Excuse me?
6th.
Oh, sorry, 6th. Okay.
What is a field day?
It's just where we have the kids outside doing different activities and so forth, kind of a end of the school year wrap up, different events we're sort of working on with the PTO. We'll see what that looks like. Usually includes barbecue for families and so forth. So we've got a grade 5 to 6 transition evening. That's on the 5th. That's why I was confused there for a second. And we do that every year with the 5th graders and their parents have a chance to come in and meet with the middle school team, talk about, the transition down the ramp to the middle school. That's a big event. It helps dispel a lot of the understandable anxiety that sort of develops over time with kids making that transition. It's a different situation certainly, but they're still in the same building and they know all the people, so it's not quite as anxiety-provoking as it might be otherwise. Montreal field trip is for the 8th grade. The annual trip is the 30th and the 31st. That's the Thursday and Friday. Graduation is slated for the 17th this year, which is the Monday before the actual last student day, which is on the 18th. So in farm to school news, if it hasn't already happened, it's about to happen to put an RFP, request for proposals, out for the fridge freezer, which we have grant funding for, and hope to have that all done by the time we get back to school in the fall. As part of the grant also, we've been able to hire a part-time kitchen help person who has the idea being that, to back up just a little, one of the hopes, one of the aspirations of the Farm to School project and the committee and the group around taking the food service in-house was that in time, Steve Head, who's the food service manager, would be able to be freed up to do some educational work in classrooms around nutrition, around the farm project and so forth. And because of just stuff that has to happen when you have your own food service. He hasn't really been able to do that as much as he might have liked. So this grant will free him up a little bit more this spring. Once we get back from break, we should be in an okay place to start doing some of the things that he'd like to do, taste tests, trips out to the garden and talk about that whole project and so forth. So those are the main things. There's a lot, you know, if you've been around schools enough, you know that once you come back from April vacation, it's, you know, down the big hill on the far side of the roller coaster, and it happens really quickly. So we've got a lot going on, and you know, it should be fun. We're hoping to have some good events. Is there any questions about any of that stuff? No?
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to committee reports, which will go really fast, and then we can get to your part now. Diversity met yesterday.
Yes,
Did you make it?
I did make it.
All right.
So just a reminder, Diversity Day is May 3. There'll be activities both at schools, but also in the late afternoon, early evening. Is it Elliott Street?
Yes.
Elliott Street, which will be blocked off. There'll be artwork there, there'll be music there, there'll be different organizations with tables set up, storyteller there, so family-friendly evening, food vendors there. It'll be from the corner of Elliott and Main down to 118. 118 Elliott has agreed to let us display student artwork in that space, beautiful space, so I urge everyone to come. And on May 2, the evening before, there will be a showing of I Am From Here. It's a very moving, short 30-minute movie where students, black students, students of color, or students that have moved here from other countries, talking about their experiences living in Vermont. And every time I watch it, I get a little choked up. And that'll be at the Brooks Library, and I'm sorry I don't know the time yet, but flyers will be going out about that.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Barbara?
Last year we did, can I?
Go ahead.
Last year we did Diversity Day, and it was in the, on the heels of the raising of the Black Lives Matter flags at the high school and the middle school. And we had a table out and had postcards written to all of the young leaders who had taken the lead on that process. And people from the community signed postcards thanking these young people for their leadership in the state of Vermont. And it was one of the most powerful, it was just like the music and, you know, people were being, it was just a really great night, so I can't wait for the 3rd. Or is there stuff specific to Putney Central School on the 3rd?
Certain, I don't know if there's things happening. I know that
As a class
Alan.
project we're working on.
Okay.
I'm sure the other classes are.
Okay.
And Putney Central's artwork will be displayed at
for sure.
118. So.
Oh, okay, got it.
Alan's doing some.
Okay, well, actually, finance has not met.
We did.
Did you?
Yep, we met last week before the SU meeting, met briefly.
Okay.
So, and most of the business of that meeting was approving the SU warrants and payroll. There was some brief discussion about the structure of finance committee in a new unified board, what that would look like. Just speculation at this point. No decisions were made. Officers for finance committee were elected. I think those are in the minutes there. And then they broke for SU meeting. So it's pretty brief.
Great.
Do any of the other 3 committees after Forest have anything to report? Lana, would you like to? Reach the Forest for the learning?
Can I come sit?
Of course you can.
Thank you.
You could have done that anyway, just if you felt like it. We're easier.
I had a quick question before we get into the forest. My understanding is that tomorrow is the next school strike for climate, and I was curious if the school was aware of that.
I was not aware of it. Did they strike for last time?
There was a couple of kids who were out during their free time, out by the street. we keep them on the sidewalk in the horseshoe there. But I haven't heard anything specific, but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if somebody decided to
Yeah.
do something.
Would you introduce yourself, because we're on BCTV now,
Oh.
and so it's not just us you get to present to, it's the whole world.
Because they're all watching.
Yes, I'm Lionel Chute. I'm a parent here. I have 2 kids in this good school, and my family moved to Putney nearly 2 years ago, and pretty much when we arrived, we became friends with Emily Pals and got to talking, and it appeared that some of my professional work was an appropriate fit to some of the work that she was involved with regarding the school forest property. And so I've been trying to help in that regard since. And as you know, the property has technically and formally changed hands. So it is no longer a school property, it is town property. And so we're kind of in an interesting gray zone right now, where Emily had spearheaded the effort to protect the forest from possible merger, and succeeded, but has since not been re-elected to the board and has moved on to do other things. So she has shared with me her perspective of the situation, and I have her paperwork related to the history of her efforts. And I also have a page of notes here that I took when we met recently, when she passed all of this to me. As I said, the property is now in town ownership, but there are a number of questions that have emerged as a result. There are short-term needs for the forest. There are questions regarding liability, and there's questions regarding disposition of the property. So the town accepted the property with the understanding that it would revert to a nonprofit organization, and that its purpose would be to serve as a
Fiscal agent, or?
well, no, that the property would actually turn over to this new organization, and that the purpose of the organization would be to facilitate nature appreciation and ecological education using the forest as sort of a living laboratory, that it would continue to have direct and growing values for this school, but that it could also serve other schools as well. And with that in mind, a name was come up with for this new organization called Forest for Learning. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that, because the organization doesn't exist yet. So I'm just going to go through this sheet a little bit and share with you some of the things that came up. In the very immediate short term, we know that there's wild parsnip growing in the meadow, and that has kind of thrown a monkey wrench into the hope of not mowing the property to allow it to be even more beneficial to wood turtles, which we know are living in the river and utilizing the meadow for nesting. So the school agreed to withhold the mowing last year, but that's when we suddenly saw all of this wild parsnip pop up, and it's not a good plant. It causes photodermatitis. So there needs to be some work on how to best manage that species, and It's something I'm glad to work on as far as connecting with the state and trying to understand what management regime might be best. Perhaps burning and then spot treatment with an herbicide might be needed. I know there's been some talk about a boardwalk, that there's clearly a lot of erosion going on to get to the bridge and to get out to the forest. In the meadow, it's kind of gotten wet and rutted out. I think a boardwalk would be excellent, and I think that would solve to some extent this issue, presuming that people would stay on the boardwalk and not go scampering around. There could also be some signage down at the kiosk related specifically to wild parsnip and what the issues are. There's a question regarding liability, because the town now owns the land. We don't know technically who the insurer is. Presumably, if it's public land, then it has some sort of coverage, but we just don't know the answers to that right now. So that's something that we need to figure out. So there was always this idea of the 501c3, and quite a bit of work was done in that regard, working with several attorneys. So the incorporation papers, I believe, are drawn up to some extent. But there's still some questions regarding that, the creation of the 501c3 and who would govern that, how to govern that. There's also a question regarding easement. So it's been the desire on the part of many townspeople for years to see the land formally protected so that it couldn't be developed. But today, that's not the case. So to create that easement, in a perfect world, the ideal scenario would be that an easement would be granted that would include some funding that could be used for management of invasive species and other needs to keep the forest intact. But the easement world is a very tight one as far as funding is concerned. And so it's like you have to get in line and you have to be patient and you have to have good data to back it up. We do know that there are rare species on the property. There could be more that we don't know of yet. So biological inventory is definitely a good thing to do if we can find the interest and the coordination. So,
Lion, can I interrupt and
Yeah.
say that as an Antioch student, we would travel here with Tom
Westland.
And as a part of that, people from all over the region would come to the school forest. And I'm wondering if the Monadnock Conservancy might not, because of some of the relationships that were previously established between the Monadnock region and this region, might have some ideas for the easement process that they might be helpful. And I'd be happy to, I don't know the rules between New Hampshire and Vermont, but I'd be happy to reach out to Ryan Owens if that's of interest.
You could. I had a good conversation with someone I used to work with at the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forest.
Okay.
But my understanding from him was that Vermont and New Hampshire are quite different. And
Okay.
because this is in Vermont, we would be looking for
Yeah.
a land trust on this side of the river.
Got it.
But you may learn some things from your contact as far as strategy and so on. So the question now is who's in charge of what? The school does not technically have a vested responsibility, a documented responsibility for the forest. The school board led the charge to bring the property out of the portfolio of the school, and it has succeeded. But now we're somewhere else. So I mean, it makes a lot of sense to keep the school board connected, but certainly also in light of what may be happening with the merger, the role that whomever, my understanding is there'd be one person from the school board that would then serve on the merged board. Is that correct? Two.
Sure, yeah.
So there may be bandwidth, there may be energy among those two people to have one of them take on a role in the forestry committee. We could continue the idea of the forestry committee, but these items all need to be worked out. And in the short term, my understanding is that there may be some urgency around funding. So a lot of what we're talking about, the 501c3, the lawyer's fees, other legal needs, and certainly with regards to these management issues, those things all cost money. And in the past, the school would have found a way to fund them. But now the question is, how much can the school help in this initiative going forward? So one of the things I discussed with Emily was, and a little bit with the chair of the Conservation Commission, Ann Carey as well, would be conceptually, if there were funding that the school was able to continue to provide to this work for the management of the forest and its disposition, that money might need to go somewhere if the merger were to happen. And so this is something we would need to discuss with Karen and the town, but in theory, the money could be moved from the school to the Conservation Commission, and the Conservation Commission could hold that money for these purposes. The Conservation Commission has a responsibility for town-owned lands and actively works on things like signage and management, keeping trails clear and so on. So it's entirely appropriate that if the property is now in the town's portfolio, that the Conservation Commission would be a logical agency to continue this process. And the Conservation Commission certainly agrees with everything that the school had intended for the property going forward, including the 501c3 and the easement and its specific designation as an educational forest. So these are all things that the Conservation Commission might be willing to champion and to bring forward. But in the short term, the big question is there funding available to support this work? And if so, how much is it? And could it be transferred to the Conservation Commission so that even after July 1st, there would be something available for trying to achieve these goals?
Okay.
That was very comprehensive.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All of
And,
that.
I should say right off the bat, just to let you people know how much time has gone into this, to getting us this far, right, thus far. Thanks to Lionel, thanks to Emily, who had it as basically the second job, as you know, to try to make some of this stuff happen, to preserve the forest into perpetuity, basically, as a resource, an educational resource, a recreational resource for the area and for schools specifically, but also for community use as well. So the challenge right now, in terms of funding, this is a Frank Rucker question, right? Mm-hmm. First of all, we have no designated monies set aside for the forest that I know of, and I pretty much know what's out there.
We could come up with it on an as-needed basis so far.
Yeah, so here's the thing, and there'll be a lot of pressure on this concept for other reasons. For other reasons, but so soon we'll get a preliminary read from Frank about where we stand on the FY19 budget, right? And we'll see where we are. Historically, we've always had a little surplus. Frank could better address what happens to those surpluses in light of the merger piece. I don't know about that. But assuming things were to be as they are until, say, July 1, typically what we could do is if somebody said, well, look, we need $5,000 for forest upkeep or maintenance of the trail, or to fund a study of, species and so forth, the board could say, it would be within their purview to say, sure, we'll earmark that out of the surplus, right? But that's as far as I'm going to go on commenting on it, because I don't know what the guidelines are, or what sort of expectations there are on us from a financial standpoint relative to the merger. I don't know if at a particular date the stuff is frozen. I don't know if there's any, I don't know what happens with that.
I do know that if we have funds with specific purposes set aside, they will be reserved for that purpose. So like our roof fund, we're still going to put a roof on us, not going to put any roof on Dummerston or whatever. It will be designated for the purpose.
Things once we know.
Yeah, but I mean,
We'll talk.
money we designate will stay designated.
Yeah, so that's really all I know. I mean, I think that, I would just say that for those who have been here during this process, which is lengthy, it goes back a couple of years, the board has been talking about putting the forest under some form of protection for at least the past 5 years. It's not anything new. It wasn't spurred by Act 46 or the merger conversation at all. That may have accelerated the consideration of it, I think is fair to say. But it's always been something that's been sort of, if not front and center, just behind that. It's sort of like, okay, so we need to pay attention to this. And so things like the invasive species, it's funny because we mow the field and then we get this stuff cropping up, right? Because we don't mow it. If you look down there now, like I did this morning, I took a walk out there, there's about a foot of water in the well-worn footpath that leads out to the bridge. So the idea of a footbridge makes great sense. That's probably an $80,000 to $100,000 proposition to do it right. So those sorts of things are all under consideration. The concept of the 501 was it 503, 501? 501c3, thank you, was about having the school have sort of a large voice at the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
For any nonprofit that would be formed, and have people like the conservation folks, like Lionel, others with particular expertise and/or interest as part of that nonprofit board. And so that's where the work was going into, exploring options with lawyers. We talked to a number of people who are professionals in the area of land trusts and so forth over the past couple of years, and that's where we're at, right?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, or comment and a question? First, the question is, are you alone right now? Is this like you don't have anyone working with you on this process? Is this feeling kind of solo?
At this point, yeah, but I do have a great working relationship with Ann Carey, and we need to discuss it more. We need to discuss it with the full Conservation Commission, but the idea of adopting the property as another property that the commission will be looking after, that may work out, and so that will help. That will certainly help. I have a good relationship with Josh and Lynn Borowski, and Lynn has been involved with the forest
Absolutely.
forever,
yeah.
and still very much wants to be. Josh has great interest in the forest for the running trails, and so he's got specific work that he's planning that he'd like to see happen for improving the trails to support his running, his races. So there's some support there as well.
And can I make a comment, or did I let you finish?
No, I'm fine.
Just to be clear, because this Putney Central School Board has sent representatives to the transition board, and that is where there is a relationship between this body and the process going through the merge. But that body and this body gets dissolved completely And then that, we're going to have an election for a whole new body. So just so you know, there is no representative from this body to the merged board, the way it was described a moment ago, that we will have a new election as of May 21st. And, right, I'm like been practicing all my dates. And we will send 2 people to a new entity, which, for clarity in this conversation, I don't think we would describe Putney Central School as having its own money anymore. There would be the money of the 4 towns and the, how many schools? 10?
Well, we're counting all of them in Brattleboro and
10?
I always have to stop and count,
Okay, I think 10.
sorry.
7, 8, 9.
9, okay. 9 schools and 4 towns would have money. And so I would suggest that if we have a clear budget need that could be articulated fairly soon, and discussions of what that, you know, like for instance, if there needs to be a budget for mowing all summer, just as a start, or if we're already taking care of that and there's some relationship we have with that,
We've been doing that for a long time.
okay.
So I would
So as
just,
long as that's all set, just to clarify that.
yeah, we have that set. So I think that the important piece though, that just for people who aren't familiar with this, is that there will be some money from the Putney Town School District budget available for part of this, probably, right, out of our surplus. That's not gonna go anywhere. So that'll happen. My guess is that if it's not at the next meeting, it'll be the meeting after that Frank will say, hey folks, I hit the total button, and this is where you're at, with, you know, probably 90% accuracy for the balance of the year. We've already stopped purchasing, so over the next week, as those requisitions are filled and purchase orders are issued, all of those figures will go in, and then really it's just fixed costs, salaries and benefits and whatever. We don't really need any more fuel between now and July 1, so those things are just done. So we'll have a really solid feel for how much money might be available to us. And as I said, just to put on the table, there will be some competing, not necessarily with the amount that this might warrant, but there'll be some other things that we need to discuss.
Yeah. So it sounds like what I should do is try to come up with a proposed budget, in a sense, for this work, and see how that compares to what's available.
Yeah, as far as I know, I mean, and somebody, Ian, maybe you would want to check into this. I mean, I'm assuming that any debts that have been incurred for legal services via the board's decisions, prior decisions of the prior board have already been retired, but I don't know that.
I don't know it for sure.
Yeah, that's not my thing.
I know,
That's your thing.
why do we paid the first letter?
Right. I'm aware of that.
'Cause I wasn't
remember
sure.
that, yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah, so I don't know.
I was, they surely would have sent a bill at this point, wouldn't they?
I would think, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's worth looking into.
I guess
No, I
the lawyer
don't know.
currently is Bob Fisher,
That's right, Bob Fisher.
so we need
That's
to
right.
get in touch with him and see where he's at in terms of his billing. So one of the thoughts that we came up with was to ask this board if they wanted to endorse me as the Forest Committee Chair. I don't know if that's necessary. I don't know if that's appropriate. I'm not looking for power anyway.
Trust me, it often gets thrust upon one.
It does, unfortunately. But if
Can I
that,
make a motion to endorse Lionel Shute as, what was the role? The Forest Committee Chair? Or what?
I don't know if you can make a motion.
I wonder-
If you can, I'm in favor of it, but
Okay.
we didn't warn it.
well, and also Tim, we haven't had a chance to talk about any of this, but
I don't know if you got my email when...
I did, yeah, and I wrote you back just to say I'd see you today, but,
Oh, I meant my email several weeks ago when Emily was...
oh, yeah, I wasn't on that list. She forwarded it to me.
No, I said whatever. I know Ann Carey responded to me. She was the only person who responded, though, and I heard from someone else. unrelated, that some
right,
of the
right.
emails had gone to spam, so I
Yeah.
suspect that
Yeah.
happened.
There was a lot of confusion at that time.
Yes.
So I don't want to in any way prevent you from doing that. If you'd like to.
By no means.
Stop jumping around.
By no means, I certainly, if you're interested, I know Emily said to me that she sort of hoped that you would take on the role, so.
Well, that's all right, but you're welcome to.
By no means, you're equally welcome to it.
No, you.
If you don't want to do
Emily
it,
actually
then
was pretty
I
insistent.
certainly, consider it, but.
I'm happy to hold on to this. I guess I'll tell you where I'm coming from. My personal goal in this would be to complete the processes that have been started. And so I'd like to see the forest protected, and I'd like to see it in good hands. I'm not interested in becoming the executive director of whatever organization gets formed, but I certainly would play a role in trying to find someone good to do that work. So I see my involvement as, perhaps a year to 2 years, something like that. And once I'm comfortable and confident that everything's in good shape, then I would move on to something else.
Well, it seems like we're all in favor of this. Unfortunately, we didn't warn it. So we would have to warn it so we could vote on it next time.
Okay,
But I, wouldn't worry too much about being turned down.
that's fine.
Emily really did leave us with that. She really felt you were the right person for this job. And she left us all with that impression, not impression, she said it right out. So,
Yeah, well, we have a good working relationship, and she'll still serve as an advisor, I'm sure. But as far as, whether it's even needed, it might not be, but I think it would be good if the board were to sort of indicate its comfort level regarding this, then we'll just continue on this work. So, when is the next meeting?
2 weeks from now.
Okay.
Thursday, the 25th of April.
And does Frank Rucker ever attend, or?
I can ask him, because I can't come next time, so see if he can.
It'd be really helpful to bring him into the conversation. April 25th. Okay, great. I'll make a point of being here at the next meeting then. Is that a good way to leave it for today?
Yeah, but, if you have anything else you want to tell us or ask us at any point, call, email, send up smoke signals, corral one of them at pickup.
Okay.
I won't be here at pickup.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to stay now and listen to the other stuff.
I like the excitement.
Well, under unfinished business, I decided that all the committees were set. We have a board vacancy. Liz, would you like to join us and have to warn this to vote you in like we did Lionel for next time, but we'd like to invite you to join us. Thank you for your application. So, is that a yes? Okay. Can she, before we vote her in, can she go to town hall? or-
No, she has to be
Okay.
voted in, so it'll have to be, again, action needed. for
Yeah,
next
you're
time.
certainly, welcome to attend and discuss. You can come sit with us tonight, you just can't vote yet. And you won't be able to vote until after you're voted in, and then you have to hop on down to town hall and get sworn in for office. So I'm gonna put that on the agenda. Shorthand. Do we have any other unfinished business that I'm just forgetting because I'm going 900 directions at the moment?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, we know why you came. So we're going to start up with a follow-up on the April 4th organizational meeting. We're currently being called on to consider alterations to the Articles of Agreement that were issued by the Agency of Education. And these are things we'd specifically like to hear from you about. We want to hear about what's most important to you so we can bring that to a merged board. we can't issue any guarantees that, you know, if you're saying, well, by gosh, we're gonna keep this, and this, or else, there are a lot of other people on that board, and we can't guarantee it, but we can certainly try. And we can certainly argue a long time if necessary. Jamie,
And
you
for
had-
some context,
Yeah.
remember at the last meeting, I had asked if we could create language that we could put out to the public, just alerting to them into the process. Unfortunately, I took everything that I asked you to research and I researched and cut it out to move it and never hit the paste button. So I'm gonna read that part. But everything else, I wanted to see if we could just have this inform our discussion, so that we're all on the same starting page.
I was just going to, is that going back that way?
No, I think we have done that.
I think there's enough there for the whole crew.
Lyle brought a whole stack of vote articles in case they were needed, but I brought mine with me because I'm personally saving it for you.
So this is useful in the way that I was realizing things are moving fast and furious, and it would be nice to be able to communicate to folks. I sent an email to my personal contacts and somebody said, somebody needs to share this widely, and I said, oh, well, maybe this is how we talk about it. I tried to be really thoughtful about my language and not, so anyways, I'll say that I was intentionally thoughtful with my language. I don't know if I hit the mark, but my goal was that we would put this on our website, which I wanted to figure out. It's too long for Facebook, so maybe we could put something on Facebook that says go to the website and look at this, and then put this in the newsletter, potentially. And so I just wanted to ask, maybe if we could go through it, and it would kind of go over the process we're about to enter with the merger. That being said, there's one caveat that I cut and paste out of the language that I want to read to you to see if it sounds okay, that I'd like to email later. It's pretty short, but it was the context for what would impact the merger timeline, which was the court case and the legislation. And I sadly forgot to hit the paste button before I printed. So, is this appropriate now as a way to guide that conversation?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. I don't think we need to read it, but do people just want a couple minutes to look it over in silence and then we can talk?
This is a brainstorming session, that's why they came.
Jamie, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, lots of questions.
In the first grouping of bullet points, the last bullet point doesn't have, it basically says voters can vote on the proposed budget and articles of agreement, but there's no time or date there. And
Yeah.
I just wanted you to explain that. Was that deliberate or?
No, I think what I did was started cutting and pasting fast and furious, and maybe a couple of bullet points are out of order. What it should say is we will be merged by July 1, that the new board is made of the 4 towns, that the transition board, which is the interim body, began meeting April 2nd. We will meet multiple times April through June. That we have 4 weeks to create a new merged budget and our new articles of agreement, and that we have to warn those by May 22nd. The board is currently composed of 8 directors. And this is where I think it gets a little confusing, and I'll make a note of that. That the merged board, there should be language, that the new merged board will be composed of 8 directors at this point.
Yeah.
The vote for those 2 representatives from Putney is probably how it should be named. Will happen, petitions are due by Monday the 15th, and the vote will take place on the 21st.
Can I clarify something?
Yeah.
So, Putney residents have to have their petitions in, but when you finally vote, you'll be voting on people from every town.
Okay, that was a big question.
Yes, that is how these.
So I did not write that down, and that's critical.
I have a question. Were
Yeah.
the states mandated by the state? My question only being that, the timeline is so short for people to get their petitions in, especially we have school vacation coming up and people might be out of the office. Is that something that we as a town or as the transitional board could push the date, or is that set by the state?
We pushed it.
We did push it.
They said, it was to
We should be done by now.
April 8th, and
I see.
we pushed it.
So this is as far as.
We're on a thing that says, in 4 Mondays, you must do this, in 6 Mondays, you
Okay.
do this, by July
Thank you.
1st, you must do this. So we had to go July 1st backwards,
Got it.
then that date backwards,
Okay.
and that's how we got this completely insane timeline.
Okay, that's fair. I appreciate knowing that. Thank you.
And so the language you just said is, we will vote on all candidates for all towns.
Yeah, it's a little confusing,
From all towns.
but
not
yeah,
for all towns.
Brattleboro will have nominees. You will vote separately for Brattleboro nominees, for Guilford nominees, for Putney nominees, and for Dummerston
And
nominees.
conversely, all of them will vote for the Putney reps.
Yes,
That's sort of the important point.
Okay.
these are by the default articles of agreement set out by the state. If it were just Putney voting for Putney, we would only get 1 representative.
Versus having the at-large.
There is no at-large position.
Right, but would have that been the other composition where we had 1 seat and then there was a bunch of at-large where we could.
There were 2 at-large positions,
Okay.
which
Okay.
realistically,
Would not.
everybody would vote on anyway, and Brattleboro has more voters than
Right.
everybody else.
Yep,
So,
So
thank you.
is that the only way we can keep the 2 seats?
as
For
far
this
as,
time.
for this time,
Where
We
there
can't.
was some discussion at the last transition meeting of looking at changing that, but for this first election, because it's happening so quickly, as Jane just pointed out, it will be that way, but it's likely that there will be changes to this, and so in the March 2020 election, this could possibly change.
So, meaning that we actually, in the next couple of weeks, get to change essentially the bylaws, or what's called the Articles of Agreement, and in that process can change the composition of the board, but because things are moving so fast, we have to treat.
Because I remember Jeanette White bringing up the study committee, that it didn't make no sense. And in terms of her role in the Government Operations Committee as a senator, she's been on it forever, that it didn't strike her as being particularly legal. That's,
we were told that the other way with the at-large members was illegal as well. So this is what the state is telling us, that if we're going to go voting by town, then we have to go with proportional representation, which
Okay.
means Brattleboro gets 4 reps and the rest of us get
and we
1.
don't want that.
This is not something I'm interested in. But
So I just
So
want to.
can I answer your question?
Yes, please, because that's.
That means in that flow, what I intended to say was the voters at the annual meeting on June 25th will vote on the new merged budget and the Articles of Agreement. So I will change that to state that.
Jane, you should add that they have to be there.
yes, that
So there is no balloted vote
No.
for the budget or the articles of agreement?
It's a
No.
floor vote.
was like town meeting.
Is it during a work day?
No, it will be in the evening,
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
And they said they could round up childcare.
That's a good event.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't write that. I didn't write the
Because they,
So it'll be 7 PM at the Brattleboro Gymnasium, Brattleboro High School Gymnasium.
That's where the vote will be held?
Yes.
Yeah, where you have to be in person in order to participate in the budget by which all decisions will be made for all 4 towns.
The vote for representatives will be regular here in town, probably at town hall because it's a small, or the firehouse, probably not in this building. But the town clerk hasn't announced that yet. So the election for representatives is a separate day from the meeting format where we discuss the budget and the amendments or changes to the articles.
In my opinion, this is a really helpful document, and thank you for putting it together. The one recommendation I personally would make is that in the timeline, the current timeline, bullet points, pushing the first thing that you see be the date and have it be chronological.
Yeah.
So that it helps people, because I think that if you get lost, you may just never stick with it. But if
Yeah.
you see a linear thing, it would be.
The only concern I had with that, and I agree with that, with the editing, but the concern I have with that is I want to start with July 1st.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a critical starting point. The other thing I just wanted to read, which I should have included, and I put at the top, current timeline for merger without court or legislative intervention, and then I had, the Vermont legislature is considering legislation in the House and the Senate relating to when forced mergers become operational. Because the Vermont House passed H39 and the Vermont Senate passed S39 with different language, the legislation goes to a conference committee to see if they can come up with common language. If you would like to contact members of conference committee, they are Senators Baruth, Perchlik, and Parent. Representatives to contact are Conlin, Kupali, and Batista. H39 is worded to force school districts that had study committees to be merged and operational by July 1, 2019. Other districts that did not comply get until 7/1/2020 to merge. The Senate language is worded to allow an operational date of 7/1/2020 for all districts under forced merger. So, and then I state on the case, I simplified the court case to this. 33 school districts in the state of Vermont have filed a lawsuit appealing the decision of the Vermont Board of Education to force school mergers. Judge Mello, M-E-L-L-O, who is hearing the case, may make a ruling as soon as tomorrow, Friday, April 12th. At that point, there may be an opportunity for an appeal to the Vermont Supreme Court. So that's all I put. I tried to take out opinionated language. And what I was asking, and the reason I brought it in writing, is that we might use this as a document to put up information in different places so people had access to information. So I wanted to find out if there were suggested edits and if we could approve that.
Yeah, you need to add the last bullet point, the voters can vote on the new merged articles that you have to be present. This is not Australian. So they
You have to be present. I will put the date and the time and location at 7 p.m. I'll also put the date and time for the May 21st thing, which I don't know.
The May 21st is the Australian ballot, so that will be at the town clerks, and polls open at 8. They have to open at the same time in all the towns, so they open it.
So it must be at the fire station. For small votes, it's always at the fire station.
Yeah, I don't know where.
Okay.
in each town.
So I'll ask the town clerk and then put the date, time, and location. You have to be present. Okay. So, yeah, to vote.
I know, did you talk about childcare? This is me with childcare?
They were saying that yes, they could provide childcare, that wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, the Brattleboro County School Board has always provided it, so as far as I know, they're.
Yeah, just
I
wanting
think that to be explicit with that.
Yeah.
And also knowing that school is over and that often that first week is when people often travel, because our camp will be probably ready. But sometimes people take that week to travel. Camps aren't starting up yet, so I'm just concerned. I mean, I know we can't change anything, but the more we can let people know to put that time in their calendars, the better.
Absolutely.
So, edits, thoughts, do we post this? Anything glaring that needs to be changed?
I actually have a lot of thoughts on that. It's probably too many to handle here. And maybe formatting, just to make it a little easier to read. I mean, mostly the timeline, I thought, could stand to be split up in terms of giving an overview at the beginning, then an overview of the transition board, then an overview of the unified board.
Nice. Ooh, I'm sending you my doc.
And then maybe,
Can I send you my doc? I don't understand these rules.
Yeah, you can send them your doc.
then I can look at it.
You have permission to edit this baby as much as you want.
Thank you. And then I think I'm right in understanding that I could send it to the entire board in the email to be discussed at the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
So could I ask a question? Is there any way that this could be accelerated so we can use it informationally?
What do you mean by
Meaning like, I don't want to have to wait till after school vacation because things are happening so fast.
So you,
I'm trying to invite people to even come to a meeting, which is Wednesday. We're going to be hosting the transitional board meeting May 2nd at Putney. We're going to have a Dummerston close by meeting of the transitional board Wednesday, the 24th of April. These are all things I want to get out to folks so they can participate if they want. So is there any process by which we can accelerate our approval of this as a communication tool?
We can approve it now.
yes, you can.
Because this is, this is the not releasing anything. It's a policy of ours, but it's not a law.
Okay, got it.
So we can actually dub you and Tim if you want, like, you guys will write it then.
You're not a quorum.
I felt that. Did you feel
Yeah.
that, Ken?
Yeah, did you feel magical and empowered and everything?
A lot more powerful.
It's being board chair, you know, my wand is starting to tingle and it's an actual wand because I'm a girl.
So are there substantive language concerns that we should address now?
I thought some of the language could stand to be more positive rather than negative.
Was the word forced repeatedly used? Something you had a concern with?
I didn't even focus on that. I think just in the first sentence under the Putney Central School Board will dissolve as of July 1st. At that point, we will no longer be in charge of our budget. I certainly think there's some value in getting that across to people.
Where did I write that?
It's right
Top
there.
Your first bullet
Top
point.
Was my very first?
Your first
Oh. I was just trying to get people to pay attention. I feel like
Sure.
when we use very calm, soothing language, it's like the boiling pot. It's so slow and so calm, and then one day people are like, why can't we release funds for our school forest or non-existent school forests? And so I just want to kind of make it explicitly clear, so however we change it, I would love it to be explicitly clear.
Sure.
However positively we frame it.
Well, I think you could also, sorry to keep going. You could frame it more positively, but then add a sentence that basically clarifies that. It's like, just so we're clear on this, when we say like the new merged board will have say over the budget, that means Putney will not. The Putney board will not exist.
Air 5.
Anyway, we'll work on it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, in speaking to parents who have tried to follow along with a lot of this, I count myself in that, I think this is a really big improvement as far as being able to follow, and I want to say thank you. For myself, I don't think it reads negative to say at that point we will no longer be in charge, because I think people are still confused about that. Like, I really do. I think people don't understand, and that's where they're coming. That's where a lot of people I know are coming from, and maybe I'm only speaking for a certain population, but.
No, I think a lot of people are very confused.
So while I appreciate the idea of being positive, to me this didn't read negative. It did read,
I think alarmist is more the word. But I think there's need for a certain amount of alarm. But I do think that editing it in the way that you described, that doesn't take away the fire from underneath us, but it adds a little bit more clarity to the point that you're trying to
I think a lot of people feel like we went from, oh, we have more opportunity and more equity and we're gonna have Spanish twice a week to, and we can have Spanish in our school. I feel like that got thrown around a lot, to now like, what? Like,
Yeah, well,
on July? And it feels very quick, which is, obviously it wasn't quick at all. Obviously this has been years and everyone's worked so hard, but if people are coming to the process and now is where they feel like they can engage, like, to meet them where they're at. And I agree, you could make a statement and then follow, to be clear, this is So, the alarm's ringing whether or not you put it in this way. So.
And I think what, in September of 2014, so.
Yeah, but I think it's really different, again, as someone
Yeah.
who watched meetings on TV before I moved here, and reads the minutes of all the boards like Liz. It's one thing to read and not really understand, and then when it really comes, like, this is what could happen at our school, it feels different. I feel like there was a lot of talk about the positive aspects of merging because then we had to merge, and so let's think about how it can benefit us. I mean, it wasn't a choice.
It's not a choice
It's
now.
still not a choice, right?
But it also could be
Yeah.
a happening thing, and then no matter who wins on that court case, it's going to the Vermont Supreme Court. Either side will appeal if they.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen, no matter who loses, that will be
Right.
an appeal.
And if the Dummerston lawsuit, 31 other districts wins, then we can merge. And that gets really confusing, but there was a lot that, just as long as you don't use that stupid PICUS study, like the merger committee did.
Can I say something, Ann?
Sure, does it involve Charles Koch?
No. One thing that I've been observing is the news media statewide about how this is working for folks, and there's a lot of information about how things are playing out, and I was trying to get some clarity at town meeting. If you remember my question, I was saying I was watching the news about tax rates increasing versus decreasing, and was asking for some clarity, because one of the positive things that was said was we'll see, I think, $500,000 of savings. And so we looked at the budget in the transitional board meeting, and we're already talking about seeing, and I'm still learning the language. When we say there's a 2%, not 2%, 2 cent increase to $1.70 on what? On $1,000 of, what?
100,000.
Okay, so for the value, so it's a $1.70 tax rate for every $100,000 your home's valued? I don't understand. Can someone explain this numeric thing?
If I have it in front of me.
So it just meaning it's a 2 cent increase. I'm trying to understand what that,
On what?
on what? So I'm still learning.
Mill rate?
Yeah, it's under millage.
No.
And we were at 168 currently, this past year.
And that's on top of the $3,400,000 budget we approved at town meeting,
Oh, I have.
without any
Oh,
changes.
But what it looks like right now is that Putney's is currently 1.686, and it will be 1.7 if we keep everything the way that it's been written by all the individual school boards. If we don't make any cuts or changes, we're going to go up a cup. Not even like 2 cents, it's less than, it's less
But on
than 2
what
cents.
sum of money, that's what I can't
Pretty
figure
even.
out. Yeah, it's pretty even, but it's just, trying to understand all the implications and how it plays out in reality versus how we were talking about it. So, any other concerns about language that should be changed? I think Tim's gonna edit it.
We can go back and forth just to make sure it doesn't lose the fire.
Okay, I'll make sure that I'll put the fire. Anything else? Okay, so the last two things that were part of this process that Ann and I, who sit on the transitional board, came up with everybody else on the transitional board. There's 10 people right now. There's 2 representatives from the high school, 2 representatives from the rest of the schools in Brattleboro,
Yeah. 2 from Brattleboro total.
2 from Brattleboro.
2 from BU6.
If you say.
Okay, you say it.
separate districts.
2 from Putney, 2 from Dummerston, 2 from Guilford, 2 from Brattleboro, representing the Brattleboro elementary schools, and 2 from BU6, which is the high school, BAMS, and the Career Center.
Okay, meaning we're a body of 10 that are meeting together twice a month on a pretty aggressive schedule. The next transition board meeting where we get to do these 2 things is really important because we were asked at the last meeting to essentially discuss our values and what is it we value about Putney Central School, and then how do we essentially create a qualitative statement about how our values translate into our budget. Because potentially one of the opportunities and challenges that comes now is we need to justify ourselves to our colleagues in 3 other towns. And so we also were asked in the process of the articles for amending to look at grade configuration, meaning would we potentially in the future have our 7th and 8th graders go to BAMs, or how would we change grade configurations here? What would be the policy on who gets to decide school closures? So could there be a vote of the board to close the school, or would the town that the school was closed in get an opportunity to say whether or not the school was closed? Because the majority of the votes would exist outside of your town that would be able to make that decision. The composition of the board is still being discussed. The terms, I spoke on your behalf, Tim. I used my precious 2 to speak on your behalf. And the number of reps, we're talking about what the implications of that are. There was a lot of discussion about the legality issues. And then, what do we do about, I use the word dissolving, which is a negative frame, but just to be clear, we will not have a legal body by which we come together here in this building anymore. And so there's discussion for those of us who are new. Everybody else has been talking about this for years, but what could you replace it with? And there's concerns that it has no teeth. It would be, what's it called?
Leadership Council.
No, what would be the advisory only, right?
Yes.
Okay, it would be advisory only, but the question is, you're dissolving 25 school, how many school board members in all of those?
Seems like way over 25 to me.
I think it is, I don't think I counted it right.
Yeah, 6 says
It's
8.
5 for each.
So let's
and I
say
can
30.
run,
So
it's
you're-
over 30.
You're taking 30 people,
Well, the Bradmore counted.
right? And you're, all the different 4 towns, you're dissolving those 30 people, turning them into 8, and they'll manage a $56 million budget and all of the schools. So how do you keep the relationships? And Herb and I talked the other day, and I was saying, what does this mean, for us? And you were talking about networks, and what do school boards and PTOs and other entities that exist within the school allow for? And it allows for people like us who care to engage with each other, talk to each other, share resources, network. And so I was very curious, I love that word, about how do we talk about, how do we keep our networks with each other and our commitment to each other, to the things that are values. So to that end, should I be quiet and do a group brainstorm about what our values are that we would like to bring to our next transitional board meeting and articulate to our peers in the 3 other towns?
I would be happy to do that.
Although, may I interject one second, because I watched your meetings on BCTV. Thank you, BCTV. And
Doug Grant, a total volunteer.
But the last transitional board meeting where you guys did this, there were 2 things that I felt like rose up
Yeah.
that aren't on that list, and I want to make sure they don't get
Oh
lost.
my God, I
And
love you.
one was one that you brought up, Jamie, and I realized that the response was like, no, it's not going to be a big deal, but the importance of our school lunch program and the independence of it has been a really big deal for many people who are here. And I hear that the response is, you don't have to worry about that, we're not going to consolidate and all do Cisco, but that, I don't want that to be lost. And I trust that, when someone says that, they mean it, but, things are changing. So anyway, there's that. And then the second one, I think might not have, I can't remember if the 2 of you raised it, but this issue of, I'm not using the right words, but I'm going to use Mr. Bristol because I love him very much. But if we have a gym teacher, and we have a full-time gym teacher, I just found out that some people don't. I mean, it's like mind-blowing to me. But if we have a gym teacher, will that teacher be pulled away and stretched too thin? The
there a
same can be
formula
for
for that?
art, the same can be for any of the, any teacher. And so whatever the words are that describe that concern, I think that is one that I hear amongst parents and I've heard come at that meeting.
I wonder, is there a formula that's used to determine how many, per student, how many hours of a specials teacher?
Okay, under the study committee, they used something called the PICUS report, and that had us losing teachers. Now, this new board doesn't have to use the PICUS report. They used it, and the report itself is a mess. It's crazy if you read it. It makes no sense. Like, a teacher should not have a para in the classroom with them. That one teacher should be able to teach all the kids in a class of 17 to 25 with no help. Well, that doesn't work.
Right, and I'll speak to that as a parent and former teacher who moved here in large part moved to Putney in particular for the school because of all these aspects. I think Herb has done an amazing job with the school community of creating this really amazing school that people want to be here. We have a housing shortage because people want to be here. I taught in a school where I had 24 students with no para, having extreme behavioral issues, English language learners, and there's a reason that people are leaving that model and going to private or going, so as a former education professional and as a parent, I'm really invested in making sure the support that our teachers have is maintained as much as possible. So I don't know if that's something you can put up there, but.
Well, I put values that you value the school food program, that you value a full-time gym teacher, that you are curious, I read this in the wrong place, about what formulas will be used to determine teacher ratios for specials and I'm guessing other things. Am I documenting that right?
Yes, and I would urge you to contact your legislators because they are the ones at the state level that are trying to legislate that student-teacher ratio.
Okay.
It's certainly not coming from the school district.
Yes, and I feel like we're all on the same page. We want the bright and best stuff for all of our kids. So
That's it though, right there. That's the equity argument.
right, and I'm
So take our school, take our town,
yeah.
and then think of what exists somewhere else.
And
Yeah.
a
That's
report commissioned by the
That's it.
legislature just
Take our
reported.
Someone else doesn't have it. There's-
Right, and I'm
there-
seeing though that it seems
there
like
it
each
is.
school is developing. I mean, I love the fact that we can learn and share resources and figure and see, okay, it's working here. Dummerston's getting their pre-K up and running. Guilford has so I guess, and I'll put this to our community, but also the shared, that it's a value to me that teachers have support, whether that's in the form of paraprofessional support, is what I'm specifically talking about.
I think that's a concern for members, current board members across all of our districts.
Yeah, I agree, but it said you're not working under these mandates that, and so we can.
They don't mandate these.
Only report that they had commissioned indicated that it's unrealistic for them to issue a statewide student-teacher ratio because we're so far apart and because we're so different from one another that they really can't. I mean, it doesn't mean they're not going to try.
So maybe
But
this is something
report says
for
not
me
to.
to advocate with other parents that may not realize that our situation, we're very fortunate compared to other schools. Not just, I'm talking in other states, and maybe just let them know if you want to keep seeing that, again, contact the legislature. Does that seem fair?
But just remember, equity doesn't mean equal. So if, this whole thing about the Spanish, right? Brattleboro had Spanish, they want us to have Spanish. Well, we have a really strong environmental program with the forest. That is equity with Spanish. We have language in 6th, 7th, and 8th, right? Yeah.
We're just doing the Duolingo study currently, yes?
Middle grade language.
Yeah. Middle grade language.
relationship.
So we have that in 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Teacher.
It's, You have to look at everything, and like Brattleboro schools have some programs that we don't have, not that we, and we might not want them. We might rather have.
Equity is a
No.
tricky one.
It is, it's very.
And I think it doesn't do it service to say that equality is not equity. So there's a lot more nuance to it. There's a great book, and there's a great chapter in this book. It's Deborah Stone's Policy Paradox book. And she is a political science professor, and she writes about a hypothetical situation in her class. And in this class, she teaches a poli-sci class, and she's given a chocolate cake. And she wants to share this cake with her class. And it walks through a handful of scenarios in terms of how we distribute this cake in a way that is equitable. And the point isn't that there's resolution. This is the way, this is equity, right? It's that there's a lot of different ways to look at that. And when we think about education, I think one of the things that there is, pretty good agreement on is that we're talking about equity and opportunity. And not just like, environmental science versus Spanish is not to delude those, but in the larger, more impactful things like pre-K versus no pre-K, versus what we know about how well kids do in kindergarten if they have good pre-K.
I know, I was.
So like here we go, so look around even our SU at the moment, and there isn't pre-K everywhere.
Right.
So that's a little bit more what the equity discussion is, and that's where it comes home. So I think
Yeah,
you got to broaden that a little bit and look around at some of the bigger pieces. Now we're talking about, those are things that really impact educational outcomes.
Absolutely.
Really big time. So it's a more nuanced discussion. I don't think saying equality and equity, I don't think it does that argument service.
Okay, they are just big.
I agree.
Could
I add on
It's
to that?
very nuanced.
Could I add on that? Is that appropriate? And I want conversations we've had too. I want to name, before I do that, value in K through 8 model. Can I put that down? for the vote?
Yes.
Pre-K.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
As a pre-K parent, I should, yes. The pre-K through 8. I already have so,
Already got them in kindergarten.
I know, I think they visited her some, pre-K through 8.
So we really have
Pre-K
10
through 8
grades in the
model.
school.
Yes, we did.
So I just want to say that I have been trying to understand our budget. We were handed a document by Frank Rucker where we were comparing all 4 towns. I think I did not bring that document. Do you have that with you, Nicole? All these wonderful, excuse me.
Or this one?
Probably the other. No,
Or
this.
perhaps the big whole entire $50 million budget?
We have amazing documents if you want to look at them. Just contact Ann at.
Yeah, and I'll talk to you after Monday.
So this is a really interesting document. So can I put a little dot on your
Yeah, sure.
document? So right here is food service operations, and it compares food service operations from all of the different schools. And so, that I had been telling everybody I memorized it, and I did not memorize it. Our expenditures are $81,000 for our food service operations. Guilford is $30,000, Dummerston is $14,000, Brattleboro is $65,000, UHS is $53,000. So I look at this and I think to myself, I want to work, is this wrong?
It's not wrong, but it doesn't include our income.
Okay,
Because
tell me.
nobody makes,
Yeah.
nobody
Okay,
makes income
Good, good, okay.
except us.
So this is why I'm glad you're saying this, because I'm sitting here looking at this, having a lot of feeling.
For the size of the-
Okay.
Okay,
A lot of feelings.
so tell me what I don't know.
Well, that everybody who has a food service contract with an outside provider has a fixed contract with that provider based on the number of kids that they have, the number of meals they intend to serve across the span of the school year, right?
Yeah.
We don't do that. Being independent means just that. So we have taken on board all of the expenses that are affiliated with running our independent program that add up to that figure, that 81,000. And I saw that the other night too, and I was like, okay, that's where we're at with the expense side. There's a revenue side that's not included in that.
So can you tell me what it is?
No, because I don't know. Well, I don't know what it is right now.
So essentially, we run
our
Right.
little business.
So rather than putting the expenses in, we need to have the revenue and expense streams,
That's right.
and then that should be the final. That would.
And that will be the final. So Frank, when we put together our dedicated end of the year statement, Frank will have all that, because we get subsidies, we get the free and reduced. There's a number of things that impact, excuse me, our program, the kids who pay for lunch every day, for breakfast every day. So there's 3 or 4 different revenue streams that sort of, all merge into that income versus
So how can we
outgoing.
compare apples to apples? Because and the other question that was coming up for me, because this was my value, like, there's so many things I value here. I value the pre-K to 8 model, I value the school to food program, or the farm to school food program. I value my son coming home and teaching me dances that our full-time gym teacher has taught him. There's lots of things that I value.
Sure.
And so, so I would love to be able to look at this, because the concern I have, and this is where, Tim, I might be alarmist, or Ruby, I might be alarmist. So I will just name this. But when we were told for the last several years that there would be $500,000 of savings in this process, one of the things that concerns me is that we're going to be compared in these 4 different towns, and we're going to start looking where we are not doing the same behavior. And that if one of the things that happens as a result of us not doing the same behavior means that now we all must start doing the same behavior and using the same buyers and using all these things, I want to understand, how do we translate that into creating a budget that is around our values? Because that's where the rubber, what is it?
It's a word.
I try to use things all the time and make them all, rubber meets the road.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I would just say about the apples to apples comparison, it's not possible, right? We are an apple, everybody else uses a food service, are oranges. So you're not gonna get that. So
Are
that's
we
just.
gonna be asked to be an orange?
No,
I don't think
but
so, no.
you have to think that just because they use a food service doesn't mean that it's bad. Because Brattleboro
Yeah.
has spent their money on
Yeah.
ensuring their food is very, very high quality, probably the highest quality.
Yeah.
I would put it equal with Putney for certain food. They've eliminated pretty much all government subsidies because they don't think that it's good food.
Yeah.
So, it goes back to the equity equal thing. And I think it's your job, those of you who will be running from Putney, to be the spokespeople when you go to this board. This is what we value. We don't want to lose this. And Brattleboro will be there saying, this is what we value. We don't want to lose this. As you know, they have universal meals. Their children do not pay for breakfast or lunch. And that's another part of why their food costs more. The quality and the fact that families aren't paying. So, each town has their own.
So I think this, to me, demonstrates where we are as a challenge is we don't know each other. We don't know what is going on in each other's places. And so I wonder what the process is to introduce us to each other.
And I think this may be one of the first steps, by you going back, whenever it is, the next meeting, and saying, so here, and I think that was your homework, here's what we value in Putney. Here are our top, and you each got to say sort of your top priorities, but here's what we really don't want to lose.
So, knowing it's 8, am I missing something from this list? Because Ann and I get to go to the transition board and create a one-pager that basically talks about our qualitative statement on our values.
That's a qualitative.
A yeah.
Quantitative.
I think we
Quality, it's a qualitative.
The budget would be quantitative. You're
It
talking
would be a
about values.
qualitative
Yes.
statement on our values as it relates to the budget, yes.
I think that when you should add extracurriculars to the full-time gym teacher note and include art, music, and the specials that we do have, this library.
Well, we only have 4 days, but
Because you're the nurse.
I think Putney is very unique
Full-time
in
nurse.
its ability to address children's needs for outside of the box learning. And I think that as we go forward, we should really look at that and how those needs will be met in the greater scheme of things. It's 2 children at Putney, one of
Help me
which-
understand how to say the last thing that you said, like out of the meaning.
Out of the box learning, like not the traditional, I can read this, get it, take a test on it, and memorize it. I'm a visual learner who requires very hands-on, explanations, visual stuff to learn stuff. And he's not learning, he just requires it in different methods. So how is that gonna look in the new environments? Does that make sense?
I think I got it, right? Out of the box learning, visual learner means more hands-on approach. Is that appropriate?
Yes.
Okay.
add to that, I don't know, I would hazard a guess that other schools are doing this, but I'm really happy with the restorative justice and circles process that our counselor has spearheaded. And that's something that's very important to me. I add that our counselor is really engaged with the population at our school, and deeply engaged, and really excited to see the circles and the process that's happening. Again, I think that's a movement in the area, so I can't speak to how it is at the school. We don't have a social worker at our school, which I know Brattleboro.
Well, they need them.
Yeah, well, but, I think in a way we're trying to meet those needs, so I'd like to just add that. That's very important to me. And I think it's emblematic of our school's values.
I put counselor, restorative justice approach, yes?
And I like the
I would just call that
PBIS.
restorative practices.
Practices,
Because it's
thank you.
really
Yeah, it's
not
not really just.
in the law enforcement and court
Right,
world.
hopefully.
Emanates from there.
Restorative, what did you say, restorative practices?
Yeah. And mindfulness as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I guess that's so embedded in our culture, I haven't
I know.
even
Well, that's
called
good.
it out.
That's right.
One of the other things I think Putney does a really good job at is the extracurricular activities like the bike riding and the running. We don't have very traditional sports groups, but our kids are very engaged in what they are doing, and riding the bikes during lunch, during the gym.
Yep.
Having that bike riding program is an essential part of the Putney Central
Matt does that.
group. And I would hope that that would be part of the conversation of our core values.
Doesn't Matt do those?
And outdoor education in general.
Does Matt do the bike?
Matt, he's one of the people. He splits it up with Josh, so.
Well, when we run the program, it's usually myself, Pip, and Tony who do it with Matt. Matt runs the younger kids and we run the older kids. Or ride with the older kids, I should say. Yeah.
I have I guess it's kind of a clarifying question and comment about the PK through 8 model. That totally belongs there, and absolutely that's a value. But I guess I want to kind of call out that I definitely think that the model is great, but I also think that part of my, specifically focusing on the middle school, part of my fear, and the fear I hear from parents, is BAMs as a concept. Totally, some kids love BAMs, the size school, that there's, academic, or that there's sports that are bigger and better and shinier, my kids would be crushed by bands. And so the idea of sending my child to bands freaks me out. And so definitely pre-K through 8 model for sure. But when I really dive into that, I think about the reason that I lean on a K through 8 model is actually more the sizing of this school. So the right sizing of this school being matching our community.
One thing that was really interesting to me when I studied education at Antioch was there was a study I looked at around human behavior, and who's going to know this study? It's like 20 years ago now, but that groups of people in around 250 have tighter social connections, and that when you get above in larger groups, it changes the social dynamics in which and how people relate to each other. Does anybody remember
There was
seeing
actually
some of this?
something, I think, in the New
Come on,
York
teachers,
Times.
help me out here. Yeah,
Jamie, there was something out recently, either in the Washington Post or the New York Times about that.
and I
think
can't, it was
200.
human behavior studies, and it was looking at, which is where the small, it was how people relate to each other and how they're accountable to each other, and it was all relationship based. When I worked with creating a food co-op, one of the things that we studied was the closer you make the aisles, the more people have to look at each other in the eye, and it increases happiness in shoppers. Granted, there is way too much eye contact that can also lead to ornery behavior in shoppers. So I didn't see the reverse study, but point being, like, what allows us to relate to each other at higher rates and know each other. And so I feel like I share your feeling about my child, which is, I'm trying to stay positive, but I don't want to say on footage, but I will say to you all privately, at some point, some of the real concerns that I have about my family and what is coming. And I will not talk about it publicly, but I will talk about it when the cameras go off. And the things that are at stake for some of our families feel really big. So anyway, talk to me after and I'll share my fears.
Can I add to something that I value about this school is the PBIS. It's worked really, really well
Can you
here.
state what that is? I don't know.
I don't know what
The Panther Paw.
Stands for positive behavior, interventions, small I, and support. That's PBIS.
PBIS.
Positive behavior,
Yeah.
the I is interventions, and the S is support. It's fairly ubiquitous throughout the district now. Most people are doing it. We happen to be in year 10 right now.
Yeah. We're ahead of everyone, but they're catching up.
Well, it's really instructive to think about that as a case study in a way, to understand that, we're not, it may feel at the local level, at the parent level, at the community level, that there's a degree of isolation in schools throughout the district, but it couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, we have had the benefit, and I'm in year 9, we've had the benefit of tremendous leadership out of the central office my entire time here. We meet at least monthly, oftentimes more than that, with members of the admin, the leadership team. So we know each other well, and we're in conversation all the time about what is working great in our schools, what needs to be improved. And it's almost like a mini think tank every month where we get together and we have an opportunity to spend an entire day bouncing ideas around, working with other outside professionals to improve the opportunities that all the kids have. So it's a good thing, and I think it's very positive. I would caution in general, like too much anxiety about what could happen as we work through this process. Because I think that people will be pleasantly surprised at how well the schools continue to function. The board stuff is on you all, it's not on us. That's separate. But, we'll build on our strengths and continue to work as a cohesive team. Lyle's done a great job and Ron did an excellent job before, so I think we're in really good shape. Yeah.
To your point, maybe you could just say a couple things. I have the impression that each school loves their town. Town loves their school.
Yeah, sure.
And so it's not like by writing this, we're like, well, yours must not be any good. I mean, I think part of the fear is that we won't be allowed to do things our way anymore. And that might be a good thing in some ways, but like you said, there already is a lot of discussion and working together and sharing of information. So I guess just, maybe Lyle at some point, or her, like there is an opportunity for a forum to hear, like this is how for parents to be part of that cohesiveness. Now, there's some of us here, but we're working on parent engagement and we want to be more involved with other parents and families as we're going to be part of a group. So maybe there's an opportunity not to do like a, school fair where we all go around and say, how do you do food and how do you do? But I know as a PTO person, I'd love to talk to other parent organizations about how they work and their strengths, and maybe that there's an opportunity to foster that through the board or the transition or.
Sure.
Well, I think two things I want to spin off of. One is what you said, Herb, about that board piece is on us, because it's really exciting to hear how well you guys work at the SU level. But the leadership councils is one of the concerns I think that people have a little anxiety about, what happens when this doesn't exist anymore? And so what could take that place, and what does that allow for, and fostering that networking within the school. So that's one piece that we're going to be talking about at the next meeting. And then the next thing is the next meeting. And that's actually a great place. It's going to be close. It'll be at the Dummerston School. It'll be a Wednesday night, April 24th. And all of the different towns are going to send representatives to talk about their values. So just as a jumping off point, I might even suggest to all the other towns that they encourage people who are demonstrating some interest to show up to that meeting in particular, because it might be a good way to get people who are paying attention and wanting to be more engaged in the process to meet each other and to hear from each other.
And if I could just make a couple of comments. So the leadership, when we originally talked about leadership councils way back in study committee days, we talked about there would definitely be a board member, and maybe not a Putney board member always meeting with the Putney Leadership Committee. Because I think one of the things that Ann can tell you is when BU6 meets, Ann isn't there talking about Putney kids at BU6. Ann's there talking about kids. And so it would be really important for a board member from Guilford, a board member from Brattleboro to come to a leadership team meeting at Putney to be able to hear, oh, this is what Putney is really valuing. It's going to be one of the ways that we start to learn about each other. In addition to your board members being able to spread that word. The other thing, and I've been reaching out to other areas around the state that are also being forced to merge and talking about what are you doing for the first round of budget. And most have agreed, except for the an area that hasn't had the meeting yet, that they're keeping the budget as is right now, because Putney put together a budget that they felt was really important for Putney. Brattleboro did the same for Brattleboro. Dummerston did the same for Dummerston. And so to have a couple of people going through and scrutinizing, like, do you really need all this money for food? Yeah, that's why we put it in there. So for at least the first round of budget, we probably aren't going to save money. But what we are going to do is ensure that the things that people value in each town are the things that we're budgeting for. And then we'll look at that process for another round. But I think it's really important that parents get involved and say, come to the meetings and say, these are the things that we value in Putney and we want to make sure we are able to continue. And you're starting to make that list here. It's going to be more important than ever that people go to these meetings.
And just to speak to that, it's
extremely important that we have childcare as an option. Times when you and the transitional board really want parent involvement. I mean, you know, I basically just blew through my husband's meeting in order to stay because you were doing really important work with the forest thing, but it meant here we are and it's almost 8:30. So I really think that as the PTO, I think we're willing to try to drum up people's interest, but childcare is key.
Unfortunately, we haven't put that into our already approved budget for this year, so we have to kind of scrape
no.
things up, yeah.
Well, could the transition board, because Barbara said it would be no problem.
Yes, the transition, but
For us,
For
yeah.
us.
No, I
And it's only because we like have to get voter approval for the budgets before.
Right,
we
and that's
spend
something
it.
that as a PTO, we could consider talking about. I also think, you know, if we had positioned this as a PTO, come talk about what you value and love at our school, we probably would have, and had one during the school day for people who can do that, and we probably would get more. This is a hard, as you know, I appreciate this in the evening, but it's a hard time. Any time is a hard time when you've got little kids often.
Sure.
So that's something we would be willing to, I'll speak for us,
Yeah.
willing to do is try to reach out with a specific forum focus and get feedback. For those who can't go to the meetings, it doesn't help with getting to know the other communities, but it does start the conversation.
And Jamie's very good at this. I already have a lot of relationships built with the other board members and people who won't be board members going forward, but I doubt they're going to give up on education in their towns. I built a lot of those relationships, and Jamie is right out there meeting all of them and ready to work with them. So I have a lot of good thoughts for cooperation going forward.
Would you mind sending us dates so that we can post it as on our PTO website?
I think what's gonna happen is Tim will help edit that document so that it's more, like, I think you said, Ruby, like, put the date first. Would that be useful? And then you can cut and paste what you want. And I'll add more comprehensive stuff. I have some stuff that didn't end up in it, which was like, this transition board meeting will happen at this location at this time. Like, I can get my detailed notes a little bit better.
And then who would we speak to about the PTO budget? And that moving forward, what that looks like?
Because we're a sub-account of school. We are not our own
Right.
entity.
So how does that work?
Depends on how you want it, what you mean on how it works. The PTO money will not be merged like with the PTO from Dummerston or anything like that. Traditionally, the board has not funded the PTO funds themselves. You're a account with us because of things that happened in the past that we shall not discuss. So you can certainly, at the present, turn in a receipt for things that you're spending money on, and they'll get a check to you pronto, because they always did when I was doing the PTO,
So there's no problem with keeping our status as a sub-account?
not as far as I know, no.
Okay.
And who would we speak to about actually getting our total? The last total I got was not accurate. I was,
Sarah's been working on that. Some of it is just,
If
Legacy
you think
issues,
it's sort of
I'd
way
say.
off, then she can look at, she can ask Jody down at the central office to help her.
that's who she's been waiting
Yep.
for.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jody's got some sick kids.
yeah. Well, and again, this is predating Sarah. It's just something we've been dealing with over time. So it sounds like we'll be able to continue pursuing it without impacting the.
Right. But the PTO's money is the PTO's money, and Dummerston PTO's money is their PTO's money.
So I kind of need to go, but I just want to just reiterate what I think Ellen just said. As the PTO, we're willing to, if you guys create this document and it becomes your call to action. This is basically, this is what's going on.
Please don't call it that.
No, but there
They're
are
also alarmist, Ruby.
No, Well, I didn't have a problem with the alarms, but I do think that there is action that has to happen. Like if people need to show up in order to vote, and they don't know that until the day after the vote, that's gonna be unfortunate. So I feel like as the PTO, we can try our best to get that out through whatever avenues we can, including potentially having, you know, just meet and greet things where we invite you guys to like roundtable discussions or coffee or whatever. But my experience with parents is just like you kind of have to try lots of different ways and try to get, you know, lots of ways and hope that people come, and when they don't be too disappointed.
So I just want to put a plug in. I realize we were saying this time is hard, and I agree. It is a very difficult time. But I do want to let you know that because of this, we do 2 school board meetings a month. And now we're on a couple of us are on the transition board, a couple of people are on committees. So it's 1 to 2 meetings a week right now. So as you're planning a forum, just know that when you request additional school board time, it feels like a real big surprise to what this has turned into.
It's also something where we could say, hey, we want to talk about Putney values, and we can transcribe and forward on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something I think we're all willing and
You would do this very well.
capable of, right?
It's been a way situation.
We even have a board, we even have a giant.
You have a giant-
It says PTO on it, and
Oh my
it's in the
gosh.
library, so we're ready. But that's something I think we are willing to do, so we'll be in touch about
Okay.
how that makes sense, and we don't want to violate it.
This looks like we're done with this process. I just want to make sure everybody got a chance to say what they were feeling.
We accept emails as well, shy people.
I'd like to create space for all voices.
Or if you think of anything you didn't think of tonight, just shoot any one of us or all of us an email. But Jamie and I are the ones going to the transition board next time, so.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for coming. We're happy that you came. Do we have anything else?
I just have 2 things I want to say. One is a thank you to her. Last time we asked her to help us post stuff on Facebook, inviting people to these meetings, and put out the newsletter that happened. One challenge is I don't think we know how to post stuff to the website, so I wanted to see if we could problem solve about getting some of the things that we had identified for the website to go up.
I figured out what the problem with that is. The PTO link on the Putney website is landing us at the SU. Dummerston.
For the school board.
The school board.
Yeah. Sorry.
Lands us at the SU. The Dummerston, their school, lands them on their own page, like Marissa has her own page. We could link from a page that belongs to us to our SU website, but it's more like communication to our parents, not minutes, but that will tell them our minutes, agendas, memberships are.
Yeah, so just in general, I mean, I think that when we revamped the website last year, with the guidance of Adrian LaPierre, who's our very part-time IT person, 1 day a week, who's the IT pro, there's been a decided shift away from having information-dense school websites and having that stuff go out via the things like Facebook or Instagram, and then on the via the school messenger system that we have, which we can send stuff out. We can send this out, anytime it's sent to us via school messenger. And there's 242 recipients of that, mostly school-based folks. But then, if you don't happen to be a parent at the moment, you're on the list. And we could add one strategy that might be useful to entertain from a board perspective is the idea of soliciting folks who are interested in getting information from the school. All we need to do is add their email. Now, the downside of that is they get everything. So when we send out an email saying there's no school today, they're going to get that.
I know.
As you know.
I get to
But it does still apply.
Yeah,
So
but
that's the thing. That's the thing. I mean, we used to have a school board page on the old website that had people's names, the board members' names and email addresses, and a little blurb about the sort of philosophical underpinnings of whatever the board was. and then a place to put all the minutes. So the minutes section is linked to the WSCSU site. And those still, so when I get those from now Tim, used to be Emily, when I get them from Tim, I just go, okay, well, upload them to what essentially is sort of a shadow on my side. It's not public, it's just a shadow page that links directly to the district page. And so that's how that flow of information.
The email that we sent originally to go up on the website said just simply an invite to the second and fourth Thursday meetings. So
Yeah.
that was pretty simple.
Yeah.
It's different than this substantive piece.
Right.
So if we could figure out how to get that just simple invite up about inviting folks, because that was a much simpler language, that wasn't,
Yeah, so I don't control that. I don't control the WSCSU site. I mentioned Gary Parzik is the person to talk to about that. He's the IT guy. He could easily drop that, I shouldn't say that. I believe that he can easily just drop that in under the heading that says, Putney Town School Board on the WSCSU site and make that happen. Because I can't do that from my end.
I have a comment, I'm so sorry. As a parent who has a full-time job and has over 200 emails coming for a day, getting an email that then I have to go to a link that then I have to go somewhere else sometimes is very time-consuming. So if there's any thought process into consolidating, I would go to the website if that was where I needed to go. But not having the jump links would be very, very beneficial, I think, for many people who either don't have good internet service or don't have time for each link to open before it can open the next one. Just as a thought process, I'm sorry to have interrupted.
so is there a way we could have Adrian, did you say, add a page that we could just upload some stuff onto?
Probably. The only wrinkle is she's gone for 2 weeks for this sort of thing.
So for Gary, we could just reach out to Gary and ask him to put the little blurb up.
Yes.
I don't know his email, do you know his email?
G. Parzik
Okay,
at WCSU.
I'll get it from you after, and then maybe when Adrian comes back, we could figure out how to get a page that we could just put information on so people could.
Well, like Marissa has a page. If you click on
Yeah.
counselor, there's
So-
putneycentral.org/counselor. And that's what I was thinking for us. Putney
Well, you could do it, I mean,
It won't.
knowing that it's not gonna last long.
I know, but it's one page.
Well, it might be the leadership council page after
Yeah,
that.
it could be. And we'd want
I'll talk to her.
we'd want to link to our SU page from there because that is where our agendas and minutes and.
Yeah, right.
And
And
that's only for
that could
people
be a
who want-
separate link somewhere, I don't know, we'll work it out. She's very cooperative and we can, I'm sure, get what you need up there.
Awesome. Okay.
I did actually, unrelated to that, but I raised the topic of thanking Emily and Alice for their service.
Yes, indeed. Would we like to issue something formal or would we just like to thank them right here and now?
I think either way is okay, but
Okay.
I know other people think.
I guess we can write something back next time, but be it resolved that we'd like to thank them for their years of service to this board that have sometimes been more service to the school than to their own lives. I'm sort of finding out what that feels like right now. But we definitely would like to thank them for all that they've done. Okay, if there is nothing else, I would gleefully entertain a motion for adjournment.
I motion to adjourn.
Is that a second, sir? All in favor? Aye. We are free.
Can I get both of your names on the end, just for the minutes?